$61,400. He typed it into a direct deposit form at 23 and then closed the tab like it was something classified. You have never said it out loud, not to your mother, not to your closest friend from college, not to the colleague who asked in the break room last March with enough casual energy to pass it off as small talk. The one you redirected with a vague answer so rehearsed it felt like muscle memory. The one who laughed and moved on and never thought to ask again. Most people think income privacy is about secrecy. It isn't. It's about protection. And at 23, you didn't have a word for what you were protecting. You just knew, somewhere in the body before the brain caught up, that the number was yours. That saying it out loud would change something. That once it existed in the air between two people, it would stop being information and start being currency. You were right, but you wouldn't understand why for years. The first silence is the decision nobody witnesses. It doesn't happen in a dramatic moment. There's no firm line drawn, no speech delivered, no conversation where you announce your intention. It happens gradually, through a series of small redirections so quiet that even you don't register the pattern forming until it's already a habit. Someone asks what you make, and you answer with what you do. Someone asks if you got a raise, and you answer with how the job is going. The question arrives and something in you simply doesn't open. Not from shame, not from dishonesty, from an instinct older than language that says, this belongs to you. Social comparison theory, first formalized by Leon Festinger in 1954, established that human beings evaluate their own worth by measuring against others. The mechanism is biological. It was useful once, for survival, for knowing your standing in the group. The modern attention economy didn't invent this instinct. It industrialized it. It built an architecture specifically designed to keep comparison running at maximum velocity, 24 hours a day, with no natural stopping point and no moment of enough. Your salary is the most precise data point the comparison machine can use against you, the number that positions you on every invisible ladder simultaneously. Too high and you become an obligation. Too low and you become a category. The moment it exists in the mouths of others, it stops being a fact and becomes a frame. And people will use that frame to understand you, need you, resent you, or dismiss you without ever knowing they're doing it. You don't say the number. The silence costs you nothing yet. You are 25 now, and the number has changed. You don't announce that either. There is a specific behavior that develops in you around this time. When the dinner conversation drifts toward money, toward salaries, toward what someone's friend earns at that consulting firm, toward the guy from your hometown who apparently just bought a house, you become very good at listening. You ask questions. You reflect things back. You make the other person feel so genuinely heard that they never notice you gave nothing away. It is a social skill that presents itself as a personality trait, and it compounds quietly. The people around you begin to fill the blank with their own assumptions. Some assume you earn roughly what they earn. Some assume slightly less. A few assume more. All of them are wrong. None of them ask again because you have made not knowing feel comfortable. You have made the absence of information feel like the presence of ease. This is the first invisible thing income privacy builds, a life that cannot be priced by anyone watching it. The second silence is what it costs socially, and why you pay it anyway. You lose some invitations, not because anyone is deliberately excluding you, because the social mathematics of spending are calibrated to a known number, and when that number is missing, the calibration breaks down. The group dinner at the expensive restaurant carries an awkward undertone nobody can explain. The friend planning a trip abroad asks a different person to come. The social architecture of your peer group is quietly built around disclosed incomes, and you have removed yourself from the blueprint without telling anyone. There are Friday nights when the silence has a specific weight. When you order delivery alone and scroll past the content other people are producing. The apartment tours, the salary transparency posts, the here's what I make at 27 videos, accumulating millions of views, and you feel the specific loneliness of a life that isn't performing itself. The algorithm has noticed your peers. It has no content from you to surface. You are, to the feed, essentially invisible. You check your account not for motivation, but because the number is the only honest mirror the evening has offered you. You keep the number anyway. Robert Cialdini's research on social proof demonstrates that humans default to the behavior of their peer group when uncertain. We use other people's choices as evidence of what we should want. Your spending choices have become unreadable to the people around you. You drive the same car for 4 years. You live in an apartment that communicates nothing about your actual trajectory. You wear a rotation of clothing that says nothing worth reading. You are, from the outside, financially ordinary, and ordinary is invisible. And invisible, you are beginning to understand, is the most underrated financial advantage available to anyone who can sustain it. The third silence is the one nobody prepares you for, watching everyone else perform the thing you've decided not to. You are 26. The internet has developed a new genre, and it is pointed directly at you. Financial transparency content. Salary series. I make this much, here's where it goes. Breakdowns structured like confessions, delivered like gift-giving, consumed by millions of people who watch someone else's number and feel for approximately 45 seconds, less alone inside their own. You watch some of them. You understand the appeal. There is something genuinely generous in the impulse. The person who posts their number is often doing it because they wish someone had done it for them, wish they'd had a data point when the world felt opaque and the silence felt like failure. You don't begrudge them the audience, you don't judge the genre, but you notice what it produces in the comments, the recalibration, the sudden sense of being behind or ahead, the inventory people immediately take of their own lives in response to a stranger's accounting. The comparison machine ingests the number, outputs an emotion, and the emotion is always either relief or inadequacy, and neither of them is accurate, and neither of them lasts, and the cycle simply runs again with the next video, the next post, the next number someone was generous enough or anxious enough to say out loud. You close the tab, you make a transfer. Nobody sees it happen. It doesn't make a sound. The fourth silence is the first time the number works for you without you ever saying it. You are 28. You have been offered a new position at a company that doesn't know what you currently make. The recruiter asks your current compensation before disclosing their range. This is a deliberate tactic, rooted in what Kahneman and Tversky identified as anchoring bias, the documented human tendency to be disproportionately influenced by the first number introduced in a negotiation. The person who names a number first almost always walks away with less than the person who waits. You have spent 5 years not naming a number. The wait is practiced. You ask about the range instead. The range they offer is higher than anything they would have proposed if you'd given them an anchor. You accept a number that has no relationship to what you were making before. The gap between those two figures, compounded through annual raises, equity, and retirement matching over a 30-year career, will be worth more than most people consciously accumulate in any investment account. You did not negotiate aggressively. You negotiated silently. The silence did the work. The fifth silence is the one that changes the texture of your relationships. You are 31. The people closest to you make decisions shaped, in ways neither of you could fully articulate, by what they believe you earn. Your family doesn't ask for money they might request if they knew the number. Your friends don't plan around an income they can't see. The people who have moved closer to you over the last few years did so because they found you interesting, because you listen in a way that feels rare, because you never make the conversation about your positioning. The ones who needed a financial ledger to locate you found someone else to locate. This is not coldness. There is a particular dinner you remember from this year. Someone at the table mentions a mutual friend who just posted his salary on LinkedIn. The number, the breakdown, the whole transparent accounting that has become a minor genre of personal finance content. The table has opinions. Some admire it, some find it uncomfortable. Someone asks what you think. You say you think transparency is a personal decision. You pick up your glass. The conversation moves. Nobody in the room has any idea that what you think about transparency is built on over a decade of choosing its opposite, and that the choice has quietly shaped every financial outcome you have. The sixth silence is the one that costs the most and builds the most simultaneously. You are 34. You have been living for 11 years now, inside a self-imposed information asymmetry. You know exactly where you stand. Nobody around you does. This is psychologically unusual, in a way that is difficult to explain to people who haven't experienced it. Most people feel compelled toward financial disclosure, not from generosity, but from anxiety, the need to be located, to have someone confirm that the number is real, that it means what you think it means. You carry the number without that confirmation. There are moments when it is heavier than expected, when something significant happens, a threshold crossed, a milestone arrived at quietly on an otherwise ordinary afternoon, and there is no one to tell. No witness. The achievement exists entirely in the space between you and the screen in your hand. You close the app, you make dinner, you text someone about weekend plans. Csikszentmihalyi's research on intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation mapped the psychological difference between pursuing something for the reward of doing it and pursuing it for the recognition it produces. Most modern financial lives are structured almost entirely around extrinsic reward. The apartment that signals arrival, the car that announces what bracket you're in, the number shared at a dinner table to recalibrate how the room sees you. You have removed every external reward mechanism from your financial life. The discipline required to sustain that, year after year, is something nobody who hasn't done it can accurately estimate. The seventh silence is understanding what you didn't spend. You are 33, you do the accounting you've never done out loud. Not the balance, not the total, the negative space. The car you didn't upgrade because no one was watching. The apartment you didn't move into because no one needed to be impressed. The watch you looked at twice and never bought because there was no occasion that required the signal. The vacation you took to somewhere quiet instead of somewhere photographable. The items removed from the cart not from scarcity, but from the clean and practiced recognition that you were about to buy something for the audience, not for yourself, and the audience didn't exist. That negative space has a number too. Most people never calculate it. You do once on a Tuesday with nothing else pressing, and the figure sits with you in a way that is difficult to describe. Not pride, closer to the feeling of finding a room in a house you've lived in for years, something that was always there, unnamed, waiting for you to turn the light on. Every dollar not spent performing a life is a dollar that has been quietly working without acknowledgement, without applause, without anyone to confirm that the decision was worth making. 13 years of that math produces a different kind of number than most people accumulate by 33. Not because the income was exceptional, because the audience was empty. The eighth silence is understanding that you built something while everyone was looking somewhere else. The algorithm never found you. The comparison machine requires visible data. It needs you to post the apartment upgrade, the salary milestone, the here's what I invested this month breakdown. It needs your participation in the economy of financial display before it can convert your insecurity into engagement. You gave it nothing. The platforms that exist to monetize your sense of being behind received from you, across an entire decade, a clean and total silence. You were not content. You were simply a person, building quietly, with no audience and no performance and no sponsored financial tool recommendation in your comment section. The Millionaire Next Door, the 1996 study by Thomas Stanley and William Danko, identified what they called the underaccumulator of wealth and the prodigiously accumulator, and found that the primary variable separating the two was not income, not intelligence, not opportunity. It was the presence or absence of a social audience for their financial life. The people building the most were almost universally invisible. They were invisible, not because they were secretive, but because invisibility is structurally efficient. Every dollar not spent performing wealth is a dollar compounding in a place that requires no performance. You understood this not from the book, but from the logic of living it for 11 years before you had a name for it. The ninth silence is the one that arrives on a Tuesday morning, quietly, without announcement. You are 36. You check the account with the same absence of drama you've maintained since 23. The number is there. It is a number that would change the way every person in your life understands you, the way your family asks for things, the way colleagues position you, the way the social mathematics of every room you enter would silently recalibrate. A number that the version of you at 23, typing that first direct deposit into a form and closing the tab like it was classified, would not have believed was accessible through the ordinary, undramatic, invisible path you actually walked. You close the app. You make coffee. You respond to a message from a friend asking what you're up to this weekend. You say not much. Maybe a walk. You haven't decided. They have no idea. The algorithm has no idea. The comparison machine has been running at full speed in every direction except yours. The group chat has no information. The dinner table has no data point. The colleague from the break room in 2016 has long since filled in the blank with something that isn't close. What it required, across 13 years, was not sophistication. It wasn't a proprietary strategy or a financial instrument or a level of income that removed you from the ordinary. It was simply the repeated, quiet, unglamorous decision to treat the number as yours, to refuse the trade where you hand it to the room in exchange for the brief borrowed warmth of being understood. The trade is always offered. In break rooms and at dinner tables, and in comment sections, and in the specific silence after someone else has said their number, and the bear tilts toward you, waiting. The offer is always the same. Say the number and belong to the room. Keep the number and belong to yourself. You chose yourself 13 times over, once per year, in 100 small moments nobody recorded. The number that began as something you typed and immediately closed has become, without ceremony, without announcement, without a single witness, the architecture of a life that nobody influenced because nobody knew it was being built. You still drive an unremarkable car. You still live somewhere that communicates nothing. You are, from every external angle, financially ordinary. You have been financially ordinary for 13 years. It cost you some rooms, some invitations, some Friday nights when the silence had a specific weight and no good answer. What it built instead is a number you will not say out loud. Not from shame, not from secrecy, from the same instinct you had at 23, the one that arrived in the body before the language did, the one that understood, without being able to explain it, that some things only remain yours if you never hand them to the room. The number is yours. That was always the only point.